Hi, you're watching the M2M Project, and I'm your host, Sebastian MacLean. Today, we'll be talking to film producer Suzanne Lyons out of LA. One of the things that I have theorized in terms of acting to some degree, but more as a writer, um,
Mm,
I kind of decided to start on a sort of scaling system where, actually initially I wrote something that was much bigger, that the Red Rock series that actually we were dealing
yeah,
with at one point, and
I love that.
um, yeah, and I'm really excited about that. But
Wow.
I started kind of going, well, let's write something that could be done on a lower budget, and then one that's sort of mid-size, and kind of working my way through. And that formula seems to work to some extent in terms of forming dialogue with certain people, especially if
Hmm.
you're trying to find the right match. But that scaling up process, from what you're saying, doesn't always sound like you may be missing something if you're too heavily focused on starting small and going to mid and then high. Because if you've got something that's appealing to production partners, it sounds like you want to put that on the table and maybe jump it up a notch. Yeah, and so getting stuck in the start small and work to big process doesn't sound like it was necessarily the route that you were following there. Am I off base there?
Well, I think nowadays it would be a little different, perhaps because we have digital. See, back then you couldn't do a SEG ultra low. You couldn't do a $200,000 movie. It would have been impossible. I mean, it was just the film alone would have been that, right?
Right.
200,000. I
Yeah.
mean, the cost of the actual film itself, like the physical film. Um, and everything was just a lot more expensive. But then, by 2004, it became much easier for people because you had, because these digital cameras were starting to work. And also in America, what happened is the unions wanted to kind of stop runaway production from everything going to, Romania and Canada and Australia and South Africa and so on, that they started to kind of change their policy. So instead of 750 a day, you could get an actor for $100 a day if you said stay ultra low, or $200 a day if it was, say, modified, for example. And the Directors Guild did the same. The Writers Guild, it took a number of years before they came around, but those two guilds became, kind of open to shooting, on American soil, which we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, of course. When the digital age, came in 2004, 2005. And just at that point, England was shutting down, as well, which was kind of where everybody used to get around at least 40 or 50% of their funds,
Hmm.
because back then it was a major tax write-off for investors. But now in America, we have the tax write-off, Section 181. In Canada, I think there's probably a tax write-off for investors as well. And also then also the other thing that started here in North America more was the tax credits that you get, 35% or 30%, or in Manitoba is crazy. It's like, what, 45% or something in Canada. So, you've got, all these other possibilities. And I wouldn't worry about scaling it down sometimes. I mean, because sometimes, like what we did with a project of Mark Smith's at the time, Mark wanted to direct. And his script, if you read it, it read like a $5 million movie,
Mhm.
but we only had $200,000 because we were going to do it as a SEG ultra low, or a second SEG ultra low on American soil here, and which was great fun. And so it meant doing some rewrites. So all he did was a rewrite and then another rewrite. And then we did a table read to see if there's anything you could cut, maybe instead of 3 roommates, it was 2 roommates, or, you just be smart, as the producer and the writer and the director, you get together and around the table and do a table read. And so, we took that script and made it a $200,000 script, which did well. And if you go and watch Seance, he did a fantastic job of
Yeah.
directing it and doing those rewrites. So, and same thing with Candy Strippers. Kate, there was 66 speaking roles in that. It was definitely $5 or more million.
Wow.
And we kill everybody, in all kinds of, expensive ways, and fires and all kinds of crazy shit going on in that movie, right? But we had only $200,000. So, Kate and Jill rewrote it like 3 times, like Mark did. So, but it started as a bigger movie, but then they kind of brought it down.
Right.
And and less we cut the number of characters from 66 to 33. But I mean, for a lot of indie movies, maybe your character's only 15 or 16 film characters and fewer locations. But I think as a writer, you don't worry about it too much unless you're wanting to produce it or direct it yourself.
Right.
To kind of get that name for yourself, and you wanted to to do something where you yourself wanted that. And like
Right.
in Mark's case, he wanted to direct. In Kate's case, she wanted to direct Candy Striper. So it was worth it for them to kind of do the chopping on it, and it didn't really affect the integrity of the script at all. I found it was, if I read the both now, they both, and the $5 million version and the 200,000, they were both equally as good. So
Yeah, well, I actually, the reason I wrote one that was, it sort of pliably fits in the sub $1 million, maybe $200,000 range. But
nice.
my thinking was that to try and find it was kind of a challenge, I guess, is why I took it on, because a director who had a small sum of money was thinking about maybe producing something, wanted a script. And I wrote something that used one actor to play up to 4 roles, but there were multiple actors. There was
Oh
a cast of
wow.
probably 3, but the whole idea was that
That's
might look a
great.
bit self-aggrandizing if you're making a $2 million movie, but if you're making a $200,000 movie and people understand you're trying to find ways to keep the cast down, and then the story's good, the gimmick itself
Yeah.
kind of helps sell
Yeah.
the idea. So that was one of I thought that
Interesting.
might be a neat way to kind of craft a story that both plays
Yeah.
into the story and plays into a low budget at the same time. But yeah, you
Yeah,
found it
that's fun.
a creatively interesting pocket to be in.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's great. And I mean, and nowadays, sometimes people will call me and say, "Oh, well, my script is probably 900,000 or or what I want." And the writer sometimes might not know, but he'll say, "Oh, no, I really see this as close to 1 million, like a SEG modified, you could go higher on this budget." And what I'm saying is, don't just think about that element of it. Think about the sales element of it too. Like, sales are not what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. What you would get from Germany today is like a fraction of what you would get 20, 15, 10, even 5 years ago. So keep that in mind too. If you want this to do well and you want those investors to come back and invest in your next one, then you want them to make some money. So do you really have to make it? Like I'm working with one group right now. And they really were wanting to stick with this 950,000. And when I read the script, I'm thinking, it's just not necessary. And they're going, "Oh yeah, well, there's special visual effects in it." Well, visual effects today are nothing like they were years ago. When we were doing Time Toys years ago, we were trying to do this children's movie back in the late 90s. And just the visual effects alone were 5 million, right? Let alone the budget was 15 million. We did it a couple of years ago for the SEG modified budget, and the visual effects were $82,000. Because all those years later, visual effects now are not what they were years and years and years ago. So, I mean, you can do a lot these days. Now, you still have to put your name in there. You still want to be smart. You still want to run names by sales agents if you are producing your own, project as a writer. You definitely want to talk to sales agents early on. You might put a bunch of names on and go, "Oh, wow, these sound great to me. She's in that TV show and he's in that TV show, which I love. And that person, he was a supporting actor in that movie that I liked," but they may not mean anything in terms of sales around the world, right? So you've always got to be chatting with, and finding out, yes, yes, I need that person. You'll find out from the sales agent, here are those 5 names that would qualify for that $950,000 movie. Then great. Then maybe you put 100,000 aside or 150, and maybe that character only plays for 4 or 5 days or 3 days, kind of thing, where everybody else plays for the 18 days. So you've got to be, smart if you're a writer who's wanting to even kind of produce or direct or start to raise part of the funds yourself, bring some of the money to the table, because nowadays there's so much competition. Everybody on the planet thinks they're a writer, sort of thing. So if you come to me where you've already got a relationship, like the one this morning, the pitch that I got 2 this morning, 2 pitches, and one of them has an actress that I just happen to be a fan of, She's not a big name yet. She's going to be, but she's a big name in another arena, which I'm not going to say who it is yet because early days. But she has a lot of fans because she's a very big name in another arena in life. Or if somebody brings you, maybe somebody who's a huge, is a huge singer who's also a good actor, but they've got, millions and millions and millions of fans, which is another movie that I'm working on right now, which is the case. Not a huge name right now, but a huge name in her own right that is going to bring on more actors. You know what I mean? It'll be a good pull for the actors, kind of thing. So you just have to be a little bit smart about it, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But as a writer, I say don't worry too much about that, because that's, if that's all my husband is, that's all he wants. He doesn't care anything about producing or any of that stuff. He just wants to write.
Right.
So he just writes the stuff that he loves, and period.
Yeah.
And I'm pitching 2 of his this afternoon to an investor, so
Yeah.
you just never know. Yeah.